everybody, my name is Alan. On behalf of the crew, I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Bridging Heaven and Earth. You know, I mean, I've said this at a lot of openings when we do this show, and we've been doing them for a long time now, and I've talked about that if I told you what day it was, because this show is shown all over the world at different times and on the internet, there'd be some trauma, there'd be some seeming war, some global warming, some horrendous thing with the dolphins or the whales or the rainforest somewhere, and that would be true. That would be true. And yet, each show is about a way for us all to recognize the purpose of our lives, to recognize the connection between us all. I mean, Bridging Heaven and Earth from the outset has been about recognizing that connection, about knowing that truth that we all are. And when we can all experience that truth in whatever way we do, in whatever spiritual path, in whatever recognition, whatever way, whatever tools, whatever means, to experience that, what I call true love, God, other people call it, that experience of that, then we recognize that the dolphins, our brothers and sisters, the whales, the trees, that all the different peoples of this earth, this glorious earth, are our brothers and sisters here. And the things we see as differences and the differentiations we make in terms of countries and geographic areas and sexual preferences and heights and weights and ages and colors and creeds and religions are so small in the magnificence of that experience of the true love. And really, more and more we know, more and more of us know that that is the purpose of this human life, to come into a realization of that knowing, to come more and more fully into a realization of that knowing. And as you know, we get guests literally from all over the world to come and to share their amazing stories, and we have another one tonight. Daniel Pinchbeck is an extraordinary modern-day shaman. He's the author of a wonderful new book, and just a revolutionary new book again, in a way, Breaking Open the Head, which is a psychedelic journey into the heart of contemporary shamanism. He's written for the New York Times Magazine, for Esquire, for Harper's Bazaar, Village Voice. He founded Open City, an art and literary journal. And his story of his successes and his career joys leading in a way into a spiritual crisis where there was no point in his life. The purpose of his life was lost to him. That he felt like a walking ghost in New York City, where he'd grown up, where he'd spent a good part of his life, and all of a sudden nothing was real, nothing meant anything. And the journey he took and the tools he used to come more and more into that knowing is an extraordinary story. And we also have with us, we haven't shown it in quite some time, it's a favorite of everybody's, the Lessia, from the Lessia Bridging Heaven and Earth CD, All the Same Love. It's a beautiful video. Lessia did it live on the set, and people asked to replay it again, and she couldn't come back tonight. So what we normally do at this time, just to settle us into the show, join me in a short meditation. We'll start with the video, and then Daniel will be with us, and his story is truly a wonderful story, an amazing revolutionary story that each of us can take from his despair, his courage, and the journey of it all. So please join me in a short meditation. If you don't know a meditation, just relax, settle in, and we have just really a lovely show tonight. So please join me in a short meditation. Thank you. So just settle in. I think there's a lot to be gained from just settling in and watching the next 55 minutes of the show. So we're going to start with, as I said, the Lessia music video. This song was written by Leslie and myself. It's performed by Leslie. It's on the Leslie of Bridging Heaven and Earth CD. All the Same Love. Hi, everybody. We're here with Daniel. Welcome.
Oh, thanks very much. It's exciting to be here.
Good. So why don't you talk a little bit about how you were going along in your life and all of a sudden you hit this patch where, like, you're a walking ghost. And, in the streets you walk your whole life and everything was fine.
Well, basically that is a sort of, in a slow motion way, I just entered this crisis, and I'd been writing for magazines and editing and, trying to write fiction. I edited this literary magazine and published it with some friends, and, it was very much part of like the New York art and literary world, the media world. And I just really began to realize that I wasn't interested in even the goals that I could possibly achieve if I became, the New York Times lead magazine writer or something. I just didn't even care. And I began to just, I was just in an existential crisis. And I said to myself, like, I have to know, is there anything else beyond the kind of materialist paradigm, which is the basic kind of paradigm in New York? This kind of ambition, you want to get ahead, you want to
fame, fortune,
yeah, exactly,
the regular American dream.
And since I didn't, both my parents were artists and writers, but they weren't spiritual in any sense beyond that. So I didn't really have a tradition to beam into. But I remembered that when I was in college, I'd had psychedelic experiences that had been very important to me. And I think I'd always thought that at some point I would go back and explore that again. And so, I just remembered that there'd been this opening to other realms, and sometimes scary experiences, sometimes like profound experiences, a sense of kind of a peeling away of one's personality. So I decided I would very systematically go back and explore that. So I began to read about it, and I discovered that, since then, which I guess I was in college in the early 80s, there had been a huge explosion of information about psychedelics in a very underground, quiet way. It hadn't really, nobody I knew was talking about it. There was Terence McKenna's works and Sasha Shulgin's works, and this book by Jeremy Narby called The Cosmic Serpent. And there were all these substances that I'd never heard of before, like ayahuasca and, iboga, which is ibogaine, which is this African substance. So first I wrote a piece for The Voice about ayahuasca, and even though ayahuasca is not exactly real, it's kind of like an underground thing. But I went through to a ritual in New York, and I wrote about that for the Village Voice. And then I got an assignment.
What do you mean by not being real? I mean, it is from a root, right? What do you mean not real? I just wasn't clear.
Real? No, it's completely real. Ayahuasca is actually brewed together from two plants, and it's the sacred substance of the Amazon basin. Sometimes it has different admixture plants added to it. One is the ayahuasca vine, and the other is a plant that contains DMT, which is a very powerful psychedelic, and they kind of work chemically together. No, I meant that I was talking about the legality of it. It's sort of like, I don't think anybody has really been arrested in the U.S. for ayahuasca, but because it contains DMT, it's kind of borderline. There's some interesting legal cases going on now about ayahuasca's status. But anyway, so I took ayahuasca in the ceremony. It was interesting, unconvincing. I also went back and re-experimented with mushrooms and LSD, which was also very interesting. Then I got an assignment from a music magazine, Vibe, to actually go to Africa, to go to Gabon, which is right on the equator, and go through a tribal initiation ritual taking iboga. And I decided I would do this.
And this was lining up, synchronistically.
Correct.
It was amazing for you that you decided you had to explore this, and then you get this assignment.
Yeah, I pitched the story to them, but I never would have imagined they would have actually sent me to Africa, but they got all enthusiastic. So I had this opportunity to go to try and experience the African spirit realm, And I found a botanist who'd been working with the Bwiti, which is the tribe down there, and he'd been studying the plant and the rituals and how the meaning of the plant and the culture. So I went down to Gabon and I met him, and we went into the jungle and had this very complicated experience because there was a lot of sort of cultural stuff we hadn't really worked out. The shaman got very greedy at a certain point and started demanding more money from us before the ceremony, and then yelling at us. But it was really, we didn't have a very brilliant cultural negotiation going on. But yet the actual experience of taking iboga was tremendous. It's a very long-acting substance. It lasts for about somewhere between 20 and 30 hours. It has different phases. It was also very clear how incredibly knowledgeable, how sophisticated the Bwiti were about Iboga and how to use it. They have music which is synced to the whole ritual. They play different kinds of music throughout the night as you pass through these different phases. In the beginning, they have you sit in front of a mirror as the visionary phase starts. Then later on, you lie down, and then you have a phase which is intensely psychoanalytic. I mean, a lot of people who take Iboga have described it as 10 years of psychoanalysis in a single night. And I would have to say that there's some truth to that, because for me, I went through, and that for me was the most intense part of the experience. But I didn't have an incredible visionary trip, but I had this amazing period of early childhood memories coming up, and really the kind of feeling, it was like being, back in the kind of feeling realm of being a little child, and the kind of the feeling of your parents fighting and what that means to you, and the fear of something mysterious under your bed. And I really had a sense going back through my life up to that point of how I'd been sort of constructed as a person, and that there was a lot of depression and despair and bad stuff, but also a lot of very fabulous stuff that I gained from that. And that's somehow where I'd arrived, having had this experience. I had a kind of feeling of liberation, that I had a real freedom to, reconceive myself and go on and do something else. So ultimately, it ended up being a very, very important experience to me on many levels. It also really began to change my dream life after a while.
In what way?
It just opened me more to the dream world, and we actually did 2 ceremonies because we wanted to get away from the greedy shamans. So we went and visited this other tribe afterwards, and we had another all-night ceremony. And there, one of the shamans of that tribe looked at me at a certain point, and I actually hadn't really taken any iboga. I mean, he'd been eating a little bit during the night, and he said that he saw my mother's mother hovering over me as I sat by the fire, and he could see that she loved me very much, but that she died recently, and she was sort of holding me back from visiting the spirit realm, and that was why I hadn't had the visions that I was supposed to have. And what was quite amazing about this was that this guy didn't know me at all, and not only had my mother's mother died recently, she died about 2 years ago, she was also the only grandparent that I ever knew, because all of the other ones had died before I was born. So if he was just guessing, I can't imagine how he would have seen this. I still don't really know how he saw it. A few months after this experience, I came back to New York, and I had this very vivid dream where my grandmother was in my house, and she was kind of like going through all of my possessions, looking through my drawers, and I called her on the phone, and I was like, Grandma, just get out of my house. I don't want you there anymore. Just go and watch television. Go do something. And she kind of, crept off and disappeared. And when I woke up from that dream, it was like that. I just felt that this had been a real experience, that she was a spirit. She'd been lingering on. And I somehow, through the iboga, I gained more awareness and more kind of spiritual force, where I could just be like, psh, and of course, even at that point, I didn't take this totally seriously. I just kind of wrote it down and mulled it over. But over time, I began to have more and more experiences like this that slowly began to convince me that there was something else going on with the dream world, where you actually are in contact with spirits and spirits of the dead and all sorts of stuff.
And so where did you go from there? You wrote this article, you'd been to Africa, and still you had that hunger to know.
Well, once again, it was synchronistic good fortune. I had a fellowship at Columbia University for a year, from this program called the Arts Journalism Program. And that turned out to be a really amazing year for me, because I worked with different anthropologists there, especially Michael Taussig, who wrote a book called Shamanism, Colonialism, and the Wild Man. And he really I went deep into the whole subject with him. And also, he was very interested in Walter Benjamin, who was this German Jewish philosopher who died in 1940. And Walter Benjamin became very important to the book, just as his thinking about intoxication and what he called profane illumination. Walter Benjamin also had experimented with hashish and with mescaline. So that really gave me a year to kind of focus on the whole intellectual kind of underpinnings of the book. And at the end of the year, I wrote the proposal, sold the proposal, and then had the ability to go on and keep exploring. So I went to I went to the Amazon. I visited a tribe in the Ecuadorian Amazon, worked with the shamans there, and took ayahuasca in the real ceremony, in the tribal situation, and that was also a tremendous experience. I also went to Mexico, visited a shaman in Oaxaca.
And how do you locate these shaman? I mean, is there like a yellow pages, or is it just?
Well, the internet is an amazing yellow pages for all sorts of things, and there would be different. I mean, as I began to investigate, different trips would come up.
Because I know we've had guests on the show who've lead tours to ayahuasca journeys and different kinds of journeys, and have written books about it, about their teachers and shamans.
Right. I mean, the Mexico one was kind of funny because we just went. I went with my girlfriend. We went to Huautla de Jimenez, which is actually, has an amazing place in psychedelic lore because it's where Gordon Wasson found Maria Sabina and had the first mushroom trip that introduced psilocybin to the modern West. We wrote about it for Life magazine. So we went back there, didn't know anybody, and went up to Maria Sabina's house. And on the way, we met one of her grandsons, and turned out her son is a practicing shaman. So we had a ritual with him. That was really nice. Yeah. So I just feel like, it was very synchronistic. Like one thing followed on another, and I just began to feel like I was soaking up all this incredible information, and also that I was coming at it with this kind of philosophical underpinnings of the Walter Benjamin and all this kind of stuff I've been thinking about. I think it gave the book a lot of breadth and a lot of depth at the same time.
Now, and what was like the evolution in your experience, in your thinking, as you moved through these paths?
Yeah. Well,
I mean, how did you go from this guy who was a walking ghost, and what was the opening, the closing, the flowering?
Yeah, it was just step by step and a constant reality testing. I would, something would. I'd have an experience, visionary experience, dream experiences. Dreams became more and more important to me. And then I would just, keep mulling it over. It's like, do I think that there's this other order that is, beyond the material realm that everybody in New York is so fascinated with? Does it manifest through synchronicities? Does it manifest in these different ways? Am I being more and more brought into it, introduced to it? And over time, it just became more and more clear to me that this had to be the case. And by the end of the process, I'd gone beyond the kind of, even like Walter Benjamin and Carl Jung, and I really was beginning to study like esoteric philosophy and occult thinking, like Rudolf Steiner and Gurdjieff, and trying to really understand, like from the other side of the the rainbow, what it all looked like. Even Aleister Crowley. So yeah, that became a really profound investigation for me. Just if there is this occult reality, how does it work? How is it structured? What does it mean for our future as human beings? And what does it mean that our society has been so, negligent and done everything it can to push it away, And
what were your answers to all those questions you asked?
Well, I think that it's, I think that there are a lot of prophecies about what's about to happen. I think there's the Hopi prophecies and so on. And, I think that we're in for a very catastrophic time. And we're going to have to, Terence McKenna wrote about the archaic revival. We're going to have to find a way to take all this kind of information that we've pushed out of our realm and reincorporate it on a higher level. And we're going to be doing that as the kind of support structures that have been holding our ship together are going to be collapsing at the same time.
Why do you think that, in essence, it was pushed away all this time? I mean, these substances have been around since time immemorial. Why, basically, in the Western world, is it taboo? Is it forbidden? What is your thinking on that? I'm sure you've thought about it.
Yeah, great length. I mean, one aspect is modern rationalism. I mean, obviously there was a need for humanity. It's part of human evolution that we should develop materialist technology, and to do that kind of required a kind of hyper-focusing on the material realm and rejection of these other possibilities. And I think we're reaching the end of that investigation in terms of it being so narrowly focused. It's just sort of tearing our world apart at this point. And
do you think it's out of balance?
Oh yeah, completely out of balance.
Yeah,
yeah. But the other thing,
not that one is wrong and one is right. It's just that it's out of balance in like almost the percentages of it.
Yeah, but except that once you begin to accept that, there are all these other levels, perhaps other incarnations, karma. I think that begins to take on a kind of priority, because then you realize that just to be obsessed with the materialist, path is not going to do you very good in, your next 5,000 lives or whatever it's going to be,
It's a bad roll of the dice.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God. Rooting one life is bad enough, at 5,000 would be a...
Well, the choices you make right now, I think, are very important. And I feel like one thing I sort of feel is going on right now is that people are making choices. They're kind of determining almost like whether they're going to be able to hang with where human evolution is heading, which is going to have to be a kind of reintegration of this lost knowledge into our modern knowledge. It's ancient wisdom and modern knowledge.
And do you see that beginning to happen, that more and more people, maybe even on an underground level or not, media?
It's definitely happening. People are very fascinated by shamanism. They're going through all these different esoteric paths. People are really looking. And from the science end, there's this fact that people are also studying, the field, the sense that there's this psi bank or mental field that can have effects on the physical world. I mean, it can't really be denied. I mean, they've done enough scientific studies that prove this. And it's just really quite, then if you look at all the quantum physics ideas and what that says about the nature of time and the nature of reality, everything that we've really discovered, now that we've gone deeper and deeper into science, supports the, perennial wisdom, the ancient ideas. It's just a question of people understanding that and putting it together,
And do you see, the way I look at a lot of things, there's a momentum. Do you see that momentum changing and, the momentum of the disharmony?
Yeah, well, right now everything seems to be speeding up. I mean, this is just, it's like a lot of the psychedelic thinkers are interested in this whole 2012 date as some kind of culmination point. And both Terence McKenna and Jose Arguelles sort of see that maybe we've been thinking about time different in the wrong way, that we have this linear model of time, and time is actually a kind of waveform or a kind of fractal that repeats on different scales in different ways, and a big wave sort of crests and ends in 2012. So at that point there has to be a kind of switch over to different world conception. And part of that process now seems to be a kind of very tight, almost like fugue state, where the destruction is going faster and faster. The reintegration of these ancient knowledge systems is also going faster and faster. So it's going to be like a flight to the finish, which seems to be, the way it's meant to be.
Explosive flight to the finish, it seems sometimes.
Seems like, yeah. Yeah,
and when did you decide that you wanted to put this in book form and allow other people?
I think as soon as I went to Africa, I knew that I wanted to write a book on the subject, and then I was I just still can't believe how lucky I was to write this book, to get it published, to have the experiences that I had, and I feel very grateful to the world for letting this happen.
And do you find, we talked about this a little earlier, that there's a certain resistance in modern day America or Western world to that knowledge being, in bookstores everywhere, or the availability, or talking about the availability?
The psychedelic experience especially is very, very threatening to the underpinnings of the mainstream materialist culture, because the psychedelic experience completely decimates the entire worldview of the mainstream materialist culture. Therefore, there are all these different methods that are kind of unconscious methods. Direct repression, that's not unconscious, but ridicule is another method that, anything psychedelic, in the popular realm becomes a kind of reason for a joke. Oh, he did too much bad acid, it's like he's like an acid casualty, so we use all these different methods, oh, it's just a 60s thing, so we use language as a kind of way of denying experience, and we've become as a culture, we've become very anti-experiential. We've become very interested in virtual technologies, pacifying modalities. 130 channels. Yeah, so people just expect to be kind of spoon-fed information and experience. They don't think that there actually is a necessity in picking yourself up and going to Africa and going to the Amazon and risking yourself and having experiences of these other cultures directly, so that you understand, first of all, that these people have tremendous wisdom. The shamans in the Amazon really struck me as very achieved. They were these guys in their 70s. They're about 5 feet tall, and they were giggling all the time. You know, everything was play for them. They were totally in the present moment. And then they did the ceremony where they were just singing all night. And taking the ayahuasca, when they sing, they're actually using the music to navigate through these different dimensional realms. And they know these realms very, very well. They know exactly what they're doing. And there are certain beings that they're sort of trying to reach. And the sort of crescendo of the ayahuasca night is this, you know, when the head shaman was doing this amazing song, just like to these other beings, it was like a total interaction was taking place that I felt I was able to witness. I was like there with them. And I realized that this is for real, that they are actually interacting with these kind of elemental beings who are kind of involved in all the processes of the natural world. It's like a different order of conscious intelligence. And the shamans actually say that sometimes I heard that the tribe says that sometimes when they do these rituals all night and get totally into it, at the end of the night, the head shaman from this tribe, the Sequoia, would look down in his hand and he would have a seed in his hand or a new sprig of a plant, and he would plant it and it would be a medicinal herb that the tribe would then use. So they were actually singing new plants into being. So this is what they said, and I went home to New York and I thought about it for a while, and I think it's true. And I think not only are they able to do these kind of negotiations with the natural world, also they're shamans who work with the weather, you know, which is pretty interesting for us when you think what's happening to our weather. I think that, you know, we are going to learn how to do this. I think that we are going to learn how to, through shamanism, through psychedelics, through our modern intelligence, when we turn this thing around, we are going to be able to interact with these elemental beings and start putting our world back together. And it's actually going to be a necessary part of the process.
To harmonize everything that's been brought into disharmony.
Exactly, exactly.
And do you find that I mean, besides the certain level of resistance on certain levels to the book and the information, that there's a tremendous hunger for that from just almost in a way the masses to know something about?
I don't think there's much hunger at the masses. The masses to me seem like nullified. I mean, just totally pacified. And I think there are, you know, a small subset of the population is perking up. And, you know, and also it's like as the whole mainstream kind of narrative is becoming more and more like a sort of toxic cartoon, you know, for anybody who has a kind of intelligence, you know, they have to at a certain point just begin to question this. You know, it's like if you read the New York Times every day and that's your vision of reality, there's just like no hope for you. I mean, there's just nothing left in that thing to hang on to. So, you know, it's just going to be a very polarizing situation for the next few years. And yet if you go to, for instance, the Burning Man Festival, you can feel that there is this evolution that has taken place in these communities where people have, you know, become much more subtle and much more masterful at dealing with altered states, at taking care of each other as a community. And, you know, that's part of the process too.
And you found that even in terms of what modern man calls illness, that these drugs have potential to be healing.
Well, for shamanism in these traditional societies, healing is like the primary use of these substances.
Harmonizing.
No, actually physical healing.
Yeah, right.
Healing. I mean, they call ayahuasca the medicine, and it's really what they'll use for almost anything, you know. And I have heard amazing stories. I mean, I haven't had many of them validated about, you know, like ayahuasca being used for cancer and having amazing effects, you know. One botanist who I interviewed told me this amazing story about Salvia divinorum, which is a psychoactive plant used by the Mazatec Indians. She went and stayed with these shamans every year, and she had a heart condition. And the Mazatec family that she stayed with, these shamans said, "Oh, well, we should do a salvia ceremony for you." They did the ceremony. This is actually Kat Harrison, who was the ex-wife of Terence McKenna, brilliant woman, really amazing. But anyway, so she had this salvia ceremony where they prayed all day and they ate the leaves of the salvia. And the three of them together went to this visionary space. She said it was like this amazing garden. And there was this 10-foot tall woman in white who was going through the garden working on the plants. And Kat Harrison realized that she and the shaman's wife were actually plants in this garden. And at a certain point, this woman in white came to them and put her hand through Kat Harrison. She said it felt really, really amazing. And she came out of the kind of visionary trance. And when she went back to the States, she felt better. She went back to the States and her heart condition had disappeared. you know. So she felt like she'd been tended to, like we would tend to a plant in a garden, you know. So I mean, this is an area. I mean, one thing that's so fabulous about thinking and writing about this area is that this is still an incredible mystery, and because the mainstream culture couldn't deal with it, you know, it breaks all of our academic categories. You know, it's still very, very open. It's playful, it's dangerous, it's seductive, it's glamorous, you know, and it's fabulous, you know. So I feel very lucky to have had the opportunity to explore it, you know.
And where do you see, like, I mean, would you want to do this over and over again, or does it reach a point where
for
you've
me,
got the
right.
message or not, or how would that work, do you think?
Alan Watts once said that, you know, about LSD, that once you got the message, you can hang up the receiver, you know. And for me, I don't think, I mean, there are other areas that I now want to explore, and, you know, that's something.
Like what?
All sorts of areas. And I told you before that I'm writing this piece for Rolling Stone about Jose Arguelles, who's doing this calendar change movement, and he believes that, you know, modern civilization is you know, in such trouble because we have a kind of asynchronous, kind of wrong relationship to time. And if we go to a different calendar, a lunar calendar, we can actually you know, re-enter a kind of synchronicity zone where we get back our natural telepathy, and, you know, I mean, it's very idealistic and optimistic, but there might be something there, and I've been exploring a lot of alternatives. I went to this thing called the Bioneers Conference, where people are trying to come up with alternative economies, you know, ecological systems, ways of doing bioremediation, you know, so sort of trying to get to a different kind of level of systemic understanding of the human relationship to the world, and through that systemic understanding, finding ways to actually make positive effects, you know. Because our culture seems to be all based on sort of incomplete knowledge and not really thinking through the ramifications of our actions, you know.
Well, we don't feel connected to a lot of things, so it's going to be
exactly,
you know,
exactly,
like a short burst of some level of insanity.
Exactly. I also got very interested in crop circles. I did a piece for Wired, and I mean, if psychedelics.
Have you been to England and seen them? Have you been in the energy of them?
I have been in the energy of them.
And what did you experience?
Quite interesting.
Tell us.
Well, you know, really within like 2 or 3 minutes, you feel like, I mean, a lot of people just sink to the ground and start sort of spontaneously meditating or crying. I mean, you know, there's definitely a strong energy field that's created in these things. And, you know, it's a very complicated area because there are a lot of mischievous, hoaxing English people who are making them, and some people think they're all fake, and I think that they're probably not all fake, but I'm going to need to spend some time there to put the whole story together. You know?
And what do you think about, like, what people talk about in terms of ETs? Did you get any experience of that in any of your journeys or any of the shamanistic experiences?
One reason I got so interested in the crop circles is a lot of them are pointing to the same 2012 date in various ways, and there are also a lot of kind of shamanic, sacred geometrical patterns kind of recur in the crop circles. And, you know, my sense is they're pointing to this 2012 thing being a real event, and then perhaps, you know, Star Trek or Star Wars are not that far from the truth. I mean, perhaps, I mean, look how fast we've moved with our technology and how fast we've developed. There may be galactic races that are out there that are watching what's happening and are waiting till we get past a certain kind of evolutionary crisis to introduce themselves.
Or something.
Exactly, exactly. I take that relatively seriously at this point. You know, I'm a little afraid that I'm just going from wacko
to extra wacko,
super wacko.
It's like which part of the cutting edge of the
But I figure it's
phrase?
like, you know, I've already broken up in my head. I might as well just go for the gusto. You know?
Right. Well, no, we were talking earlier. I mean, you know, the root of it is we're hurtling through space on a ball. So
exactly.
Everything is what's reasonable in that.
Exactly.
Know? So, you know, once you have that experience a little, it changes the way you perceive things. So in your book tours, I mean, you find that people are really open to more like going to Africa, more, I mean, is Africa coming in a way to America? Is Africa coming to the West?
Well, I don't know if Africa's coming to the West.
I mean, with those drugs, those understandings.
A lot of different things are happening simultaneously. I did a panel discussion recently in New York, and this black guy got up, and he talked about how he's into martial arts, and kind of shamanism, and there's some kind of new, in Harlem, this new kind of mixture of shamanism and martial arts. I never heard about this before. What globalization is doing, it's destroying the planet at an incredible rate, obviously. On the other hand, it's causing this amazingly fast, exchange of information, and spiritual traditions are kind of melding and mixing.
I mean, the internet's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. So, Iboga is an interesting story because it's known as ibogaine also, and as ibogaine it's being used as an experimental treatment for heroin and cocaine addiction, and it's been known about since the 60s as having, or since the 70s really, as having this potential. And people have been really having remarkable experiences.
That's what I meant about some of these things using this as real healing methods.
So there are different, ibogaine is illegal in the States, but there are clinics opening up in Latin America and South America, clinics opening up in Canada. And it's going to be possible for people to go and have this treatment. It's you can do it one or two times.
And this is a psychotropic?
It's ibogaine. It's the psychedelic. It's the synthesized version of what I took in Africa. You take it as pills. It's less. It doesn't introduce. Oh, by the way, most of the psychedelics, I should tell people, induce a lot of nausea and vomiting. Ayahuasca, you tend to vomit out all this stuff, and iboga, you vomit out a lot. And for the tribes, that's actually a good thing, because it's a way of purging. They see that as part of the healing process. And a lot of people, when they take ayahuasca, feel that they get rid of things
for the shamans? Do they also, or are they so used to it?
Yeah, some of them get more used to it. I even get more used to ayahuasca. I don't lose my cookies anymore when I take it. Anyway, so you can go and you can have this ibogaine experience where 25 hours, you are there, often you trip.
And this is a heroin.
Yeah. Often
detox.
You get this very specific psychological, psychoanalytical material is brought up. At the end of this experience, the addicts find that they have no craving or interest in the substance they've been addicted to. And this
is after a long-standing heroin addiction for like 15 or 20 years.
And they have no withdrawal symptoms. Yeah, 3 days. And, that's the new place they're in. And what usually happens is they have a few months to begin to kind of change the lifestyle factors that led them into the addiction. If they can bring themselves to do that, they can really have a new lease on life. So that's really
And are there follow-ups? Do you go back every year or 6 months?
Well, you don't have to. A lot of people, apparently it's become common to do a second treatment.
And there's nothing available like that in the United States at this point for a treatment center?
No, all the treatments we have are a substitute, a kind of dependency for
one drug for another.
Exactly.
And so, but there are centers like this in Mexico and in
Canada and in Europe, yeah. So it's ongoing.
And so that's another place that, America has prevented healing in a way by its stringent fear or hatred of these kind of substances.
Right. I don't think it can be stopped now. Ayahuasca is another very interesting situation. There are these different religions that use ayahuasca from Brazil. There's two kind of native Christian religions, Santo Dame and Uneo de Vegetalis. I think there are more also, but there are law cases going on about both of these religions. They believe that they just have protection to use ayahuasca as a sacrament. The religions have official approval in Brazil and in Holland. They actually have protection according to the UN. And under the Religious Freedom Act that Congress put through, I think in 1993, they have a very good argument that they deserve protection for ayahuasca. And there's a case in New Mexico with Uneo de Vegetalis, and they've won the first round with the federal judge. So at the moment, ayahuasca is definitely in a kind of gray area.
I understood, because we had other people on the show who, did a lot of that kind of journeying, and they said there were two separate substances. One is illegal and one isn't. So it's like when it hits your stomach or something like that.
Right, well, that's true. Well, it's very complicated, because the ayahuasca, one of the plants contains DMT. And DMT is one of the most remarkable substances that you can imagine, because if you smoke straight DMT, Terence McKenna wrote about it a lot, you enter a completely convincing, sort of cartooniverse. It's like a very, very high speed, completely enveloping other reality. And there seem to be beings there. McKenna called them the hyper self-transforming machine elves or something. There's a lot of action taking place there. You can't quite figure out what's going on. And it's like just as you begin to figure it out, you're out of there again. You're back in your reality. So DMT, and the other thing about DMT is that it's in your brain. It's probably secreted by the pineal gland. which also secretes melatonin, which modulates the sleep state. So it's possible. There's another form of DMT called 5-MeO-DMT, which has very powerful effects, also kind of totally reality transformative, but less kind of cartooniverse, more kind of like immersion into some kind of all. So you have these substances that are actually produced in your brain, and we've made DMT illegal. I mean, it's sort of interesting, you know, that you could make something that's in your own body and spinal cord and brain illegal. But what they made in the 60s, what they made illegal was synthetic DMT. And what ayahuasca contains is natural DMT from plant sources. So it's a gray area whether that's possible or not. Yeah, so I mean, it's possible that these substances, you know, have something to do with how we dream at night, that there may be like a slight, you know, emanation from them. And there's a book called DMT, the Spirit Molecule. This Dr. Rick Straussman got FDA approval to do a study of DMT in New Mexico in the early 90s. And his thesis is that DMT is the spirit molecule, that it appears in fetal development after 7 weeks, 49 days. And he thinks that when it appears, it's like a kind of a conducting mechanism that brings the spirit down into the body. And he thinks that when you die, the pineal gland releases a flood of DMT, which courses through your whole brain anatomy and causes the kind of life review that people describe having in near-death experiences. And he developed his theory partially because in Buddhist texts they talk about the soul reincarnating 49 days after death. So he was totally struck by this, synchronicity of the 49 days. So we don't really know what DMT does, but you know, we've got it in there, and it's, you know, another area of the mystery which we're going to have to explore.
And when a lot of people talk about like the psychedelic and the psychedelic experience, they talk about the experience of, people call it love or oneness of God. I mean, would you give those feelings, did you have those feelings of a connectedness of all things?
Definitely. I've had it off and on. I mean, a few times with LSD, I remember after years ago when I first began to sort of re-investigate, I took LSD and just walking around outside in Tompkins Square Park in East Village one morning, and there was trash everywhere and, you know, very old people sitting on park benches and old trees, and I just felt like, yeah, like I was, you know, could be part of anything. And you know, I definitely think that's an aspect of it. And
do you think that's part of the shaman's experience in you know, South America, Central America, Africa, that, you know, that experience of like the love of the oneness of the connection between us all has been part of their knowing as they experience it?
Yeah, I'm sure. And I think that they also just feel very differently about both the supernatural realm and the natural realm than we do. And I think that part of the, you know, 2012 change that's taking place is that our relationship to the natural world is going to shift. And I think that when the relationship to the natural world shifts, the relationship to the spiritual and the supernatural world shift automatically.
And,
you know,
and what's the change that's going to happen, do you say?
I think we're, you know, just an awareness that, you know, there are all of these other dimensions that are kind of orthogonal to our reality, and that we can have experience of them, and that they're in fact always kind of inviting us in a way.
We're not separate from them.
We're not separate from them. We're beings that are undergoing a certain evolution, probably, I mean, I would think over many lifetimes. And there are other beings that are undergoing different kinds of evolution. Some of them are helping, you know, helpers to us. Some of them are hinderers. Some of them are tricksters, you know, and, you know, to sort of, you know, it's one way to describe it is the imaginal realm. And we're going to have to claim our own kind of responsibility and our own kind of agency in the imaginal realm as well as in the physical realm. I think one thing that's happened with modern society, it's because we've denied all of this information. You know, in Indian societies, they know about, for instance, the trickster, like the
coyote.
Yeah. So, you know, the Indians in northern Mexico have this ritual, the yaqui, where every year they'll unleash the trickster for 2 weeks. People go around in masks, and these jester masks. They'll cause mischief, cause all sorts of trouble. Then they'll take the masks and they'll put them in a big bonfire, and they'll get rid of them. So they'll have exorcise, that kind of demonic energy. Since we don't have any kind of exorcism of that demonic energy, it's like gathered everywhere. It's like when you get a kind of call from an automated, nightmarish voice, or a kind of deal with a bill that takes forever to pay, and you have to go through 6 services. It's kind of like the vengeful trickster. It's just, totally vibrating around our realm now. So we need to confront it, deal with it, put it in a big bonfire, burn it up, and then move on and try something else.
And did you find that, as you experience more and more in these journeys and these experiences, that that you live more in the moment, that you were more spontaneous, that you were more intuitive?
Yeah, I mean, that's something, I even realized that when I was back in college and I had my first mushroom trips. One of the first amazing things I realized was how I had this kind of intellectual habit of, constantly distancing myself from the moment and never actually just being in the moment. And, definitely, that was one of the really amazing things I took from going to Africa and just seeing the tribes people in their ceremonies. It's like their total interest is the present moment, and they're totally in the now. And I think we should try to do that too, definitely.
And
it's giving yourself up to the synchronistic sort of flow of reality and the intuitive.
And the question is, how would you say that we're prevented from doing that, and how do these psychedelics break open the head? Because I always describe, we're such blockheads. When I saw the name of your book, it's like break open the head. We're such blockheads. And then the funny part, as soon as, there's a crack in it, we rush up there with
Well, partially the whole structure, we've created now prevents us, because it's like, you're thinking about what you're going to do tomorrow, how you're going to pay the bill, how you're going to take care, of this or that. We're constantly in these kind of passive situations. We're on a plane for 8 hours, we're in a car for 6 hours, so we're always restrained, we're always kind of controlled.
Well, seemingly our physical form is restrained, the rest of us.
So, I think it's going to, before there can be any kind of real change, there's going to be kind of structural catastrophe.
Well, in essence, a lot of the spiritual paths, Don Juan and Carlos Castaneda always talk about, erasing personal history, being in the moment. Who wrote Be Here Now? There was always like, how do you, get to the moment? All the spiritual paths.
Don Juan definitely said, I don't have a history. Carlos Castaneda would try to ask him about where he was from, what his childhood was like. He's like, I don't have a history anymore. I'm just here,
Right. And that's why he could dress up in a suit and be the same. Because, that was as shallow as anything else to him.
Yeah.
And so, you see this continuing and basically your life coming more and more through your experiences into living in the moment, living in the now, and living in that, the freedom of that moment.
I really actually, I feel that what I discovered through the process of writing this book was that I have, I feel like I have some kind of karmic task that, still is going to require a lot of work and a lot of intellectual labor. So, there's some being in the now, but also just some trying to really understand what I have to know and how I can present it, how I can move the information.
Well, do you think they're contradictory?
A little bit. I think living in the now might be, if I'm one of the lucky ones to survive past 2012, maybe I'll get to live in the now for a while.
So you got 10 years of this crap of being in your head half the time?
It's very fascinating. I can't believe the kind of information that I've been introduced to, and that I'm the one to try to bring it into the mainstream. It's
have you been given that in any visions or by any of these shamans that they say specifically, Daniel, go to America and bring?
No, I just know that it's the case. I in a sense, in a sense, I feel that it's definitely part of my task.
And did you feel that way? Was that like something you felt just since a certain, shamanic trip, or just for a long time?
It was really a culmination. It was a lot of synchronicities also with my different trips and world events that were happening. When I went down to the Amazon, when we went down there, the presidential election was about to happen. When we came out, the president still hadn't been decided. The morning of September 11th, I was editing a book that I published through Open City by a friend of mine, which is a long poem about corporate globalization. The book is titled World on Fire. I just opened the book, and it's about the oil situation, corporate globalization. It's a rant about, the whole technosphere, basically.
The Twin Towers
and
blown.
And I saw it out my window, because I live in downtown Manhattan. So I was like, there was like really one synchronicity after another, and I just began to think that, and a lot of people have had, I'm not saying that I'm even special, but, there's some task here that I'm being given clues.
The show's over.
Oh, okay.
Amazing.
Okay.
Good night. God bless you. If you need any information, Alan, 805-687-2053. Good night.